Covering Dunkirk, Fredonia, and all of northern Chautauqua County, this is WCVF 88.9 FM, The Voice.
And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Big Blue Sports. I'm your host, Matt Volt, a junior at SUNYAC Fredonia. Welcome to the second to last episode of Big Blue Sports this semester and this school year, which is definitely bizarre to say. Happy May, everyone. Today is Thursday, May 1st, 2025. This is the start of what I believe is the best month of the year for a few reasons. Obviously, for college students, summer vacation starts later this month, graduation this month for our seniors who are departing us, as well as the weather in May is usually something I'm a very big fan of. Today, it's nice. It's been a little bit unpredictable the last couple of days in Fredonia, though, because 2 days ago, so on Tuesday, it was about 74 degrees, and I was in shorts, and those who know me know that I'm at my happiest when I get to wear my cargo shorts every day. Yesterday, it was in the 40s. I was calling a high school softball game on WDOE. I was calling the Fredonia Dunkirk softball game. And I had a long sleeve on underneath my Fredonia hockey jacket, and I was cold calling the game. Today, I'm in shorts again. So it's been a little bit unpredictable. It's in the mid-70s. I know we're supposed to get some rain. It's supposed to rain this weekend, but next week is dead week, of course, and then classes are done for the 2024-2025 academic year, and then I'm a senior, which is kind of disgusting and something that I'm not processing in my head really at all. But we'll roll into the show. A few things to talk about. Obviously, big game at KeyBank Center tomorrow night. Game 1 of the NLL semifinals between the Buffalo Bandits and the Vancouver Warriors as the Bandits try to advance to the NLL finals for the 4th consecutive year and the 5th consecutive season. As remember, the rest of the season in 2020 was canceled because of COVID, and there was no 2021 season because of COVID. And before that, the Bandits reached the finals in 2019. They lost to Calgary in the 2019 finals. Of course, there was no season in 20 or 21. 2022, they made it back to the finals. They lost to Colorado. 2023, they beat Colorado, and then they beat Albany last year. This year, it's Buffalo and Vancouver, and Saskatchewan and Halifax. Game 1 between the Bandits and Warriors, 7:30 tomorrow night at KeyBank Center. I will be there. You can follow along on my social media. On my Twitter, it is re_lax lacrosse. That's a project that I have started in my social media class, where I have dedicated a website and social medias to coverage of the Bandits. And being a season ticket holder helps because I can be at every game. Although I will say live tweeting the games can get a little chaotic when goals are being scored left and right and you're there and we have to high-five everyone. We do this thing. I sit in section 123 at the games, and we sort of have a high-five train where I have 3 guys behind me and I high-five all of them right in a row after, of course, high-fiving whoever I'm there with, and whether it's our former sports director, Parker, who I have the season tickets with, or whether it's my sister or my girlfriend, we'll high-five, and then I high-five the guy in front of me, and then high-five everybody behind me, of course, and then we have some people who come running over to our section from other sections to join the high-five train, which is a lot of fun. But the Bandits we'll talk more about later in the show. Buffalo, Friday night, 7:30, and then Game 2 in Vancouver on Sunday. And if a Game 3 is necessary, that would be next weekend at KeyBank Center in Buffalo. My wallet is kind of hoping that doesn't happen, but we shall see, and certainly anything is worth it. So we'll talk about Fredonia sports as we always do, and we have some playoff action for the Blue Devils as well, and we'll start off talking about lacrosse. The Fredonia lacrosse team the last handful of years has had some tough seasons. Head coach Tori Poffenberger is one of the coaches that I know best on this campus, and I talked to her for an article very early in the season, and she talked about how the last few years, so Coach Poffenberger has been here as long as I have been here. She was hired coming into the fall of 2022, which is when I started my freshman year. And so she said that, the few years before her and her first few years, have been difficult. They got close to making it to the SUNYACs last year, and the year before. This year, they did make it. They were the 6th and final seed. They went 9-8 in the regular season, 4-4 in conference play, and they clinched a playoff spot with a 20-5 win over Morrisville at Morrisville last week on Wednesday. The first round of the SUNYAC playoffs were this past weekend, and Fredonia drew a very difficult matchup in the first round, having to go on the road to face New Paltz, which historically is very good at a lot of different sports. Softball is one of them. And unfortunately, the same final score from the Morrisville game was flipped in this game as the Blue Devils fell by a final score of 20-5. They trailed 8-1 at the end of the first quarter and were really just not able to come back from that. New Paltz scored the first 7 goals of this game, and it's very hard to come back from that, when you fall behind. Blue Devils did fight back. They got a few goals late, but ended up falling by a final score of 20-5. And again, you're playing against a New Paltz team that is very good, and that's a tough draw in the first round. New Paltz was right up there with Oswego and Cortland, who were the top 2 seeds. They were separated by a couple of games. So those 3 are sort of interchangeably the top 3 in SUNYAC lacrosse. And that was really the main goal for the season that Coach Poffenberger told me about, was making it to SUNYACs, and they were able to do that. So I don't think you can look at this season as a failure of a season. They finished 9-9, 4-6 in conference play. So I really don't think that you can look at this season as a failure of a year. They've got some younger players on their team, and they're definitely taking a look ahead at 2026. One of the other teams who they're not quite done, and now I'm yawning because I've been up since 7:30 this morning. One of the other teams that they're not quite done, but they are eliminated from the SUNYAC playoffs is baseball. Of course, they had a solid run in their games down in Florida, but it has not gone the way they hoped in conference play. 10-21 overall record, 3-12 in SUNYAC play. Their most recent games, they had a doubleheader down in Pennsylvania against Geneva College on Tuesday. They lost the first game 8-5 and the second 7-4. They have 4 games left. They are headed way up north to Plattsburgh this weekend for 3 games in 2 days. They play 3:30 at Plattsburgh on Saturday, and then a doubleheader at Plattsburgh starting at noon on Sunday. Final game of the season will be at Hilbert next week, so much closer drive for them. Baseball has been eliminated. However, the softball team, on the other hand, they look like they're going to be in the SUNYAC playoffs. So they have a handful of games left. They're 10-16 overall, but 7-5 in conference play. And remember, for conference standings, overall record doesn't matter. It's just your conference record. So yeah, 10-16 overall doesn't necessarily jump off the page, but a 7-5 conference record has the Blue Devils in 5th in the SUNYAC right now. So how the playoffs work, you have the top 6 get in, first 2 get first round buys, and then you have the 3 versus 6 and 4 versus 5. So right now, New Paltz, Cortland, Buff State, and Oneonta have all clinched SUNYAC playoff spots in that order. Then you have Fredonia in 5th, and right now, Plattsburgh and Potsdam are tied for the last spot. They are both 5-9 in conference play. Then you have Morrisville at 3-10, Oswego 3-12, and Canton at 0-14. And the Canton softball team still looking for their first win of the season, period. They are 0-25 on the year. And of course, 0-14 in conference play. So the games left on the schedule for softball, in their most recent games, they had a doubleheader at home against Buff State on Sunday, And the first one was a low-scoring barn burner. The Blue Devils won that one 1-0 in an extra inning, 1-0 in 8 innings. They actually won the game on a fielding error by Buff State. So that's a big win. Brought them to 7-5, or brought them to 7-4 in conference play. And then the second game of the doubleheader, Fredonia lost that one 8-7. A handful of games left. They actually are playing right now. They're at Oswego, but facing SUNY Canton. First pitch of the first game was at 11 o'clock this morning. Second game will be starting around 1. And if I can pull up the live stats, that is not, I pulled it up and okay, so I have good news and bad news. The bad news is that the Canton website has the New Paltz logo instead of the Fredonia logo. The good news is Fredonia is up 16-2 in the bottom of the 5th inning. So it's fairly safe to assume that the Blue Devils are going to be on their way to a win in this game, which would put them at 11-16 overall, would give them an 8-5 conference record. Again, the second game of the doubleheader anticipated to start sometime around 1. Wouldn't be surprised if it was a little bit after 1, because with all the run scoring, this game will probably be moved back a little bit. They are coming back home for some games this weekend. They have a doubleheader at home against New Paltz tomorrow. That starts at 3 p.m. And then their final games of the regular season, a doubleheader at home against... Holy cow, I am yawning unbelievably today, and I have no idea why. At home against Oneonta, a doubleheader starting at noon on Saturday. That here, the SUNYAC playoffs begin on Thursday, May 8th. So, and again, the higher seeds host the first round matchups. So it would take a decent amount to catch Oneonta for 4th, but it's certainly not impossible. Fredonia right now sitting in 5th. If the regular season ended right now, you would have New Paltz facing Plattsburgh/Potsdam. Plattsburgh's ahead in the standings right now, but they're tied. New Paltz against Plattsburgh New Paltz and Cortland would get the first round buys. You would have Buff State taking on either Plattsburgh or Potsdam, and then Oneonta and Fredonia. And Fredonia would be going on the road to face Oneonta. But again, handful of games left. Looking good so far today, though, against SUNY Canton, who is still looking for their first win of the season. So we'll see how this weekend plays out and where Fredonia sits in the SUNYAC playoff standings when the dust all settles. The final sport, the men's and women's track and field, the SUNYAC championships are this weekend, starting tomorrow and running through Saturday, hosted by Cortland. And for the men's team, there's a few interesting athletes to watch, Cam Sample being one of them. Of course, for the women's team, Cara Pelleccia in the pole vault is another to look out for. But earlier this season, Cam Sample was ranked very high in the long jump. So the two main events that I've got my eye on is Cam Sample in the long jump and Cara Pelleccia in the pole vault, because those are two that could very easily be looking out. Also, the 4x100 relay team for the men's team as well. Those are some athletes that could potentially be looking at advancing past SUNYACs, but we'll see how that all goes. And again, those are hosted by Cortland starting tomorrow and running through Saturday. We're going to take a short break. When I come back, an update on the NBA and NHL playoffs. Thanks for listening to Big Blue Sports this afternoon on WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. And welcome back to Big Blue Sports. WNYF Television's current longest-running late-night talk show, A Sit Down with Brock, is coming to a close with a grand series finale. And the question on everyone's mind is, how will the host top himself this time? Get ready for even more off-the-wall banter, sharp zingers, hilarious interviews, and overall, expect the unexpected. If you're interested and don't want to miss out, tune in on Thursday, May 8th at 10 p.m. on the WNYF Television YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/WNYF Television. Make sure to tune in for that. That'll be something interesting and fun to watch for sure, as Brock always certainly has fun with the shows that he comes up with. He gets very creative with it for sure, and I know has lots of fun with it. So a playoff overview. The NBA and NHL playoffs are going on at the same time right now. Of course, the Buffalo Sabres not a part of the NHL playoffs, but that's about on par with saying that grass is green anymore. We'll take a look at the NBA playoffs first, because we've had some series come to an end. Only 2 sweeps in the first round, both number 1 seeds sweeping the 8 seeds, the OKC Thunder in the West, taking down the Memphis Grizzlies in a 4-game sweep, and the top seed Cleveland Cavaliers beating the Miami Heat in a sweep as well. The other series that have come to an end, the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference, the Boston Celtics, beating the Orlando Magic in 5, and the 4 seed Indiana Pacers beating the 5 seed Milwaukee Bucks in 5 as well. And game 5 of that series was crazy. The Bucks were up. I think the Bucks were up by 7 with like 15 seconds left or something like that. And Indiana somehow came back and won. And then after the game, Tyrese Halliburton's dad got in the face of Giannis Antetokounmpo, which is not a good idea, but it looked like the two of them were about to fight. So that was interesting to watch. In the Western Conference, how's this for an upset? The number 6 seed Minnesota Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves take out the LeBron and Luka Doncic-led Lakers in 5 in the first round. Now, I'm not overly shocked that Minnesota won this series. They've looked good. The fact that they beat the Lakers in 5 is impressive. And it's something to watch. The Timberwolves will face whoever wins the Rockets and Warriors series. That's the 2 versus 7 matchup. And that one we could see an upset as well. Going into Game 6 tomorrow night, the Warriors lead that series 3-2. Game 6 in San Francisco tomorrow night at 9 p.m. on ESPN. The Thunder, of course, already having advanced to round 2. They will be taking on whoever wins the 4 versus 5 series. That is the Denver Nuggets against the Los Angeles Clippers. Denver leads that series 3-2. And Game 6 out in Los Angeles is tonight at 10 p.m. on TNT and True TV. So we'll see if the Clippers can force a Game 7 or if Nikola Jokic will advance to the second round and his Denver Nuggets will take on the Oklahoma City Thunder. In the Eastern Conference, we already have one second-round matchup. The top seed Cleveland Cavaliers will take on the number 4 seed Indiana Pacers. Game 1, the date is yet to be determined as the rest of the first round finishes. And the number 2 seed Boston Celtics will take on whoever wins the series between the number 3 seed my New York Knicks and the 6 seed Detroit Pistons. The Knicks lead the series 3-2. Game 6 is tonight in Detroit at 7:30 on TNT and True TV. Detroit has not won a playoff series in a very long time. Coming into this series, they hadn't won a playoff game in a very long time, since 2008, since the 2008 Eastern Conference Finals against the Boston Celtics, I believe, a series they lost in I think 7 games. And as Boston went on and won the championship that year. The Knicks trying to close out the series tonight. They had the chance to do that at home. And that's sort of an interesting thing. The Knicks have performed over the last couple of years significantly better in closeout games on the road than they have at home. And some people have a solution for this. Tickets at Madison Square Garden are disgustingly expensive. And a lot of times, average diehard fans are getting priced out. Instead, it's your, Wall Street stockbrokers and your famous actors who don't really care too much about what's actually going on the court. And it's interesting that that's going on. It's the same type of vibe that I get from Toronto for the Leafs, and we'll get to hockey later. But it's very odd to me. It's very interesting to me that the Knicks have done better on the road, and that's a lot of people think that is the reason. So Game 6 is tonight. Knicks trying to close out the series and advance to round 2 to take on the Boston Celtics. We'll take a look at the NHL playoff bracket, and we've got some good battles in the Western Conference, but we'll start in the East as a couple series have wrapped. Both series in the Metropolitan Division have wrapped up as the Metro Division winner Washington Capitals take out the Montreal Canadiens in 5 games. And the 2-seed Carolina Hurricanes defeat the 3-seed New Jersey Devils in 5 games as well. And Game 5, the Hurricanes won that one in double overtime on a goal by Sebastian Aho. So the Hurricanes advanced to round 2. It'll be Caps and Canes in the second round of the playoffs. The defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers have also advanced to round 2, the number 3 seed in the Atlantic Division, beating the 2-seed Tampa Bay Lightning in 5 games. The Panthers move on to round 2 to face either the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Ottawa Senators. That's the last series left. The last series left in the East. As they are going into Game 6, I got to get a drink here. I got something in my throat, which is lovely. I never said I was fully a professional, folks. You know, I mean, I'm still, it's interesting. And now this is going to take me into a segue. But a few weeks ago, I had to miss the Big Blue episode because I was out sick. I had some sort of, upper respiratory type of thing. I was coughing a lot and, I didn't really have too much of a voice. And it's interesting. I've noticed in other shows, and I noticed as I was calling the game for WDOE yesterday, that my voice, it's like it requires more force to get my voice to the same volume as it did before I was sick, which is interesting, really nothing more than a footnote, but it is what it is. So anyways, as I was saying before my throat decided to dry up, Game 6 between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Ottawa Senators is tonight at 7 p.m. in Ottawa. Toronto leads the series 3-2, trying to advance to the second round of the playoffs for just the second time in the last 21 years, where they would take on the Florida Panthers, the defending Stanley Cup champions. The Western Conference went into all of their Game 5s tied 2-2. Every series in the West did, which is fun. I think that creates some good hockey. So the series in the Central Division, the top seed Winnipeg Jets, the President's Trophy winners, and the St. Louis Blues. Winnipeg leads that series 3-2. Game 6 in St. Louis tomorrow night at 8 p.m. on TNT and True TV. The other series in that division, Game 6 between the Dallas Stars and the Colorado Avalanche. Dallas leads that series 3-2. Game 6 tonight in Denver at 9:30 p.m. on TBS and streaming live on Max as well. In the Pacific Division, the top seed Vegas Golden Knights lead the 4-seed Minnesota Wild 3-2. Game 6 tonight in Minnesota at 7:30 on ESPN. And then Game 6 between the LA Kings and the Edmonton Oilers tonight in Edmonton. The Oilers up 3-2. They have the chance to close out the series at home. Game 6 tonight at 10 p.m. on ESPN. And again, as I was making my playoff picks a little while ago, you might remember, I said if a division winner was going to lose in the first round, it was going to be Vegas losing to Minnesota. And I don't know that will happen, but with Game 6 in Minnesota tonight, the Wild with a chance to force that Game 7. And I think we've had some phenomenal series. That Dallas-Colorado series has been great. The Jets and Blues have really gone back and forth, and that's a Blues team that needed that long winning streak just to make the playoffs against the President's Trophy champion Jets. And, Winnipeg is a team that's been very good in the regular season the last number of years, but still looking to find some playoff success. And then in the East, obviously, you have Toronto. The Leafs have not even been to the finals since 1967. They haven't been to the Eastern Conference Final since 1999. They lost to Buffalo that year, and I'm wearing that hat today. And, if they beat Ottawa, if they close out Ottawa, then they're taking on the defending Stanley Cup champions in the second round. And the question, of course, is with Mitch Marner being a free agent at the end of the year, does he come back to Toronto? What do the Leafs do with him? I don't know that they can afford to pay him what he wants and what other teams would pay him. So it's going to be something to watch for sure. Again, a handful 4 Game 6s tonight. Again, just to recap, Toronto and Ottawa at 7 p.m. on TBS. Vegas and Minnesota, 7:30 on ESPN. Dallas and Colorado, 9:30 on TBS. And LA and Edmonton at 10 o'clock on ESPN. So exciting playoffs for sure. Hopefully one day Buffalo could be a part of them. I don't know if I'll see that in my lifetime at this point. But either way, we are going to take a short break. And when I come back, going to preview Friday night's Game 1 between the Bandits and the Vancouver Warriors. We're going to talk NFL draft at the end of the show, as well as Brandon Beane's comments calling into WGR and sort of expressing his frustration over the debate of whether or not the Bills needed a wide receiver. So thanks for listening to Big Blue Sports this afternoon on WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. And welcome back to Big Blue Sports. Well, the Buffalo Bandits are moving on to the National Lacrosse League semifinals for the 5th season in a row. They will face the Vancouver Warriors this weekend. They got there by winning the lowest scoring game in the history of the National Lacrosse League. The Bandits defeated the San Diego Seals 5-4, which sounds like a hockey score or a baseball score long before it would ever be a lacrosse score. And it's not that the two teams didn't shoot. The Bandits scored 5 times on 44 shots. The Seals 4 goals on 52 shots. As far as power play opportunities, the Seals were 1 for 5 on the man advantage. Bandits 0 for 3. In the first quarter, only 1 goal scored. Ian McKay, as his offense has really just continued to soar for Buffalo this year. I mean, he has been absolutely remarkable. And, I mean, so McKay finished the regular season second on the team in goals. He had 37 goals this year, which smashed his previous career high of 19, which he did in 2023. He was second on the team only to Josh Byrne, which more on Josh Byrne a little bit later. So McKay opens the scoring, and that's it for the entire first quarter. It's 1-0 Buffalo after 15 minutes of play, and everybody's kind of looking around at each other and going, are we going to see some goals at some point in this game? In the second quarter, San Diego would respond early. 2 early goals, one from Zach Currier with a shot that just went over Vince's right shoulder. If Matt Vince has one weakness as a goaltender, it's his right shoulder. If he's going to get beat, it's a lot of times over the right shoulder. And that's where Currier's goal went to tie the game. And it wouldn't be very long before San Diego took the lead for the first time as a pass found Wesley Berg standing right in front of the net, and he was able to beat Vince to put the Seals up 2-1. The Bandits would come back and go on a little bit of a run late in the second quarter as Dane Smith did what Dane Smith does and provide the offense when it's needed for Buffalo. He sidesteps a defender and buries a shot to tie the game at 2 with just under 9 minutes to play in the first half. So it's a 2-2 game. Both goalies, both Chris Origlieri for the Seals and Matt Vince for Buffalo, both goalies stood on their heads in this game and were absolutely fantastic. Those two guys were fully locked in. So the next Buffalo goal, just under 4 minutes to go. It's a 2-2 game. A shot by Josh Byrne is stopped by Origlieri, but Ian McKay finds himself in the right place at the right time and beats Origlieri on the rebound to put the Bandits up 3-2. Getting later in the first half, Matt Vince sends an outlet pass for Nick Weiss breaking down the left wall. Weiss steps by a defender in front of another and beats Origlieri with the shot to put the Bandits up by 2. Now, I just want to say that, not that I can predict the future or anything, but I just want to say that I called the Nick Weiss goal as they were doing the player intros. So, for context, Nick Weiss's goal song is Friends in Low Places by Garth Brooks, which is one of my all-time favorite songs. And I said before the game, I leaned over to Chloe before the game, and I said, Matt Vince is going to, or not Matt Vince, I said, Nick Weiss is going to score. and we're going to get to sing Friends in Low Places. She's like, all right, hopefully. And then Vince did score, or Weiss did score. Vince, my goodness. So Weiss scores to put the Bandits up 4-2. Buffalo has the ball as the time is winding out on the first half, and a pass from Dane Smith finds Kyle Buchanan behind the net. He dives forward and puts the shot past Origlieri right as the buzzer sounds to end the first half. And we all thought it was a good goal. We all saw that it was in. They show it on replay, and I am not kidding. That ball crossed the line with less than a tenth of a second left on the clock. They reviewed it, upheld it. It was a good goal. Buffalo leads 5-2 at the end of the first half. Would you believe me if I said the Bandits would not score again in this entire game and they would still win? So in the third quarter, again, Origlieri standing tall. Buffalo couldn't get anything by him. And with about 5 minutes to go in the third quarter, Trey Leclerc goes, he puts Ron John in a blender, goes right around him and beats Vince with the shot to cut the Buffalo lead to 2. That was the only goal scored by either team in the entirety of the third quarter. 15 minutes to go, Buffalo 5, San Diego 3. Crazy low scoring. Never seen it. In the fourth quarter, Matt Vince was, again, incredible. He stood tall. Was absolutely remarkable. The Bandits also did a good job collecting some loose balls, getting second, third opportunities, but just couldn't get anything past Origlieri. Just over 6 minutes to play, Tehoka Nanticoke had the ball in the San Diego end. It was right down in front of us and received a brutal cross-check to the back of the head, courtesy of Seals defender Graydon Bradley. It was initially called a 5-minute major. They reviewed it and reduced it to a 2-minute penalty, and the Bandits could not capitalize on the power play. So the Bandits are up 5-3, and with about a minute and a half to go or so, just over a minute to go, and the Seals pull Chris Origlieri for the extra attacker. What followed was one of the worst sequences by an individual player that I've ever seen in my entire life. And I don't mean to dog on Dylan Robinson, but it's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen in a lacrosse game. So Dylan Robinson gets the ball and is running up the floor towards an empty net. And, he's got San Diego has a defender back. Robinson has a teammate with him. And everybody's kind of standing up thinking he's going to bury the empty net goal and we're going to get out of here with a win. Robinson proceeds to not only completely miss the wide open net, but when one of the Seals defenders went to the wall to collect the ball, Robinson came up behind him and gave him a nasty cross-check to the back of the head that was about the most obvious 5-minute penalty you could ever see. So not only did he miss a wide open net, he also took an incredibly careless and stupid penalty. And I get it, there was only 58 seconds left on the clock, but it was like, my goodness, never seen something that bad. Ironically, San Diego actually did end up beating the clock in their own way as Zach Currier snuck one by Vince with just 1 second left on the clock to cut it to 5-4, but that was it. The Bandits win this game 5-4 and advance to the NLL semifinals. With this win, Buffalo became the first team to ever win a playoff game despite being shut out for an entire half. That first team to ever do that in the playoffs. They were the fourth team to do that in the history of the league. They also broke the record for the fewest goals scored by a winning team in NLL history. And again, this was the single lowest scoring 60-minute game in the history of the NLL, which dates back to the late 1980s. So the Bandits are really going to need to find some scoring. It was a scary moment late in the game. Josh Byrne limped off the floor with an injury, did not return. However, NLL insider Adam Levi, who was last year's winner of the Tom Borelli Award for Media Person of the Year, Adam Levi tweeted out earlier this week that it is anticipated that Byrne will be ready to go for game one against the Warriors tomorrow night. So the Bandits taking on the Vancouver Warriors, who defeated the Rochester Nighthawks. Vancouver was a team that was out of the playoffs and got a massive boost when they made the trade for star goalie Christian Del Bianco at the trade deadline. And Vancouver's been a team that's red hot. I remarked in hosting Sports Hour over at WNYF, the TV station, I remarked that Vancouver is the one team in these playoffs that I don't want to face. And to be completely honest, I feel that way even more after the Bandits only put up 5 goals against San Diego. Now, credit to Chris Origlieri. He's a phenomenal goaltender. San Diego definitely has one of the top ones in the league. But you're playing against Christian Del Bianco, who has been the best goalie in the league this year. I don't think there's any arguments for anyone else. Matt Vince might be second on that list. But you're going up against the guy who has been the best goalie in the league this year, a team that's red hot, and you're coming off a game in which you only scored 5 goals. So the Bandits are really going to need to find some offense tomorrow. Whether it's Byrne, whether it's Stainsmith, they have to get the depth going. They still don't have Chris Cloutier healthy, which definitely hurts, but Ian McKay is going to have to get the scoring going. Chase Frazier, Tehoka Nanticoke, these guys have, Kyle Buchanan too, those guys have got to step up and find ways to beat Christian Del Bianco. On the other end, goals are going to be really hard to come by in this game. So defensively, every possession matters just a little bit more. Matt Vince played an unbelievable game last week. Can he do it again tomorrow night? That remains to be seen. Again, game one tomorrow night in Buffalo at 7:30. Game 2 is on Sunday at 9 p.m. in Vancouver, and then a game 3 would be next weekend in Buffalo. The rest of the playoffs on the other side of the bracket, you have the Saskatchewan Rush taking on the Halifax Thunderbirds. The Rush hosting game 1 on Saturday at 6:30. Game 2 the next Saturday. It's interesting, the Rush versus Thunderbirds series only has 1 game this weekend and 2 next weekend. The Bandits and Warriors have 2 this weekend and would have 1 next weekend. So scheduling is a little bit odd. Game 1 of this series is actually in Halifax. So it's really weird how the NLL does their playoffs. The higher seeded team can choose what games they want to host. You can either choose to be at home for game 1, on the road game 2, home game 3, or what the Rush chose to do, they want to go on the road for game 1, and then they'll be at home for back-to-back in games 2 and 3. So it's interesting, a little bit of unique scheduling. Again, all these games on ESPN+. The Bandits will be broadcast locally on the CW23. Game 1, Friday night at 7:30 in Buffalo. Game 2, Sunday night at 9 o'clock in Vancouver. So, of course, we'll be watching them very closely, and we'll talk about them next weekend as well. Going to take a short break and then finish up the show today talking about the Bills draft, picking Maxwell Hairston, defensive back from Kentucky, in the first round, as well as the rest of their draft and the comments made by Brandon Beane on a call to WGR earlier this week. Thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports today on WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. And welcome back to Big Blue Sports. So for the final segment of the show, we're going to talk about the NFL draft, the Bills draft specifically. And, well, the rest of the draft is there was some very, very interesting things that happened during the draft, some interesting selections, and most notably, a very interesting fall, which is certainly surprising. So we'll start off, obviously, the number 1 overall pick was certainly not surprising with Cam Ward going to I almost said Carolina Hurricanes because I have the goalie in my head, going to the Tennessee Titans, quarterback from Miami. A big trade up at number 2 as the Jacksonville Jaguars move up from the 5th pick to the 2nd pick to take Travis Hunter from Colorado. Of course, Hunter excelled at both defensive back and wide receiver while playing at Colorado. He says he's insistent that he's going to play both at the NFL level, so we'll see how long that lasts. I'm not really sure. The Giants selected Penn State edge rusher Abdul Carter with the 3rd pick Offensive tackle Will Campbell from LSU going to the Patriots at number 4 as they get some protection for Drake May. The Browns take Michigan defensive tackle Mason Graham with the number 5 pick. Ashton Genty, the star running back for Boise State, goes to the Raiders at number 6. Armand Membu, offensive tackle from Missouri, drafted by the Jets at number 7. The Carolina Panthers surprise some people and go wide receiver. They take Arizona's Tet McMillan with the number 8 pick. The New Orleans Saints get some offensive line help at number 9, selecting Texas tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. And with the 10th pick, the Chicago Bears with new head coach, former Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson. They go skill position, get Michigan tight end Colston Loveland with the number 10 pick. Some other interesting picks. The player I wanted, who I hope the Bills would trade up to get, defensive tackle Kenneth Grant from Michigan. The Dolphins stole him at pick number 13, which was earlier than I thought he would go, but certainly interesting. Some teams get offensive line help as well. The Green Bay Packers draft a wide receiver in the first round since they took Javon Walker in 2002. They select Texas's Matthew Golden with the 23rd pick. As far as quarterbacks are concerned, the New York Giants traded back up into the late first round, traded up to pick number 25. And I said, I was watching the draft on my phone. I missed most of it because that was the night we had our radio station banquet. I was watching on my phone. And I said, when the Giants traded up, I said, this is for Shitter Sanders. I said, I really think this is Sanders. And they went with Jackson Dart instead. Jackson Dart is someone who I kind of have some concerns about. I think he's a solid prospect. But there was a stat that something like 60% of his dropbacks have been either RPOs or screens. So he doesn't have as much experience fully dropping back and reading a defense, which raises some alarm bells in my head. The Ravens take Georgia safety Malachi Starks at 27. He'll fit in great with them. And then, of course, the Bills. So with their first-round pick, Buffalo selected Kentucky defensive back Maxwell Hairston with the 30th pick. Hairston was not someone who I had on my radar, but it makes sense, and I think it's a good pick. He was the fastest corner in the draft. He's a very good player. And the other thing that I noticed about him, when other players were getting drafted, Hairston was going up and like high-fiving and handshaking all the players who were getting picked by other teams as they're going out on stage to receive their jersey and go take a picture with Roger Goodell and, give them all sorts of hugs and that stuff. He was shaking the hands of everybody. I wonder if that stood out to Buffalo. I think that's good. Obviously, there were some conversations that there was a case involving him back in from his time in high school. There hasn't been anything that has come out about that. Supposedly the Bills have done their due diligence with that, and we'll see how that progresses. The Bills really did a good job of addressing a lot of needs in the draft. They traded up in the second round to take South Carolina defensive tackle TJ Sanders. I love that pick. I think they need someone like that. They also took Kentucky's Deion Walker in the fourth round, and I really like that pick too. They also took Arkansas defensive end Landon Jackson in the third round, and Landon Jackson was really emotional when he was picked by the Bills. You could tell it meant a lot to him, which is really, really cool. And hopefully these players have an impact, and I really think they will. The defensive line, they're investing in it. The Bills needed to go defense. Their first 5 picks were all defense. In fact, they only had 3 picks where they selected offense. The only receiver they took was Maryland's Caden Prather in the 7th round. Of course, general manager Brandon Beane was frustrated with the WGR 550 guys talking about needing a receiver, and then the Bills signed Elijah Moore yesterday. So make of that sort of what you will. That will do it for this afternoon show. Before I go, I want to thank a few people who I know are tuning in today. I want to thank my parents and my dog, Cooper, who are all tuning in. My parents are proudly representing Fredonia, wearing their Fredonia alumni sweatshirts today, and proudly tuning in, so I appreciate that. I want to say a very special thank you to my girlfriend, Chloe Kowalik, as well, who is tuning in from work. None of this show and anything would be possible without the support of those close to me and listening to this show, so I always very much appreciate it. Thank you to all the people at Fredonia Radio Systems who make this show possible, as well as anybody else out there who is tuning in this afternoon. Only one episode of Big Blue Sports left, as I will be back next week to recap the Bandits series against the Vancouver Warriors. Hopefully we'll be moving on to the NLL finals, but we shall see. Going to talk more about the NBA and NHL playoffs, and as well wrap up Fredonia sports and wrap up this semester. Thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports today on WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. Local at 1 is up next with all your favorite local music hits, and we will catch you all next week. Bye now.